March 17, 1943. Berlin. The night smells of coal smoke and frost. The lights in the city are dimmed by blackout curtains. The streets whisper under the boots of soldiers, who pretend not to hear the silence. Somewhere, in the Tiergarten district, a single building still burns with light. The headquarters of the Abwehr, German military intelligence. Inside, men who know too much and say too little wait for an audience with Admiral Wilhelm Canaris. He sits at his desk beneath a wall map of the world. Red pins mark front lines that are no longer moving. A small brass clock ticks steadily beside a pile of folders stamped Geheim. The clock is the only sound in the room. The door opens. A captain enters, carrying a brown envelope tied with red string. His face is pale. He salutes. "Herr Admiral," he says. "Urgent report from New York Station." Canaris gestures for him to set it down. "From Oster?" "No, sir. From Agent Kohler, via Madrid." That name gets his attention. Kohler's reports were always thin but precise. Industrial intelligence, not gossip. Canaris unties the string, opens the envelope, and unfolds a set of carbon sheets. The first line is typed in English, then translated below. One American factory now producing one 4-engine bomber per hour. Canaris frowns, reads it again. The letters blur. He adjusts his glasses. "Per hour." The captain nods. "Agent insists it is accurate. The source is an employee at a plant called Willow Run, Michigan, owned by Ford." The Admiral reads the words a third time, slower, as if that could make them less absurd. 1 bomber per hour. He looks up. "How many hours in a day, Captain?" 24, sir." "Then they build 24 in a day." "Yes, Admiral." He sets the paper down. The clock ticks. Outside the window, somewhere far off, an air raid siren groans and dies away. "Verify the numbers," Canaris says. His voice is flat. If it's true, it changes everything. The captain hesitates. "Sir, there's more." He unfolds another sheet. Photographs. Grainy, blurred, taken from a distance. They show a hangar larger than a city block. Assembly lines filled with metal wings, workers in overalls the size of ants. In one frame, a banner reads, "Willow Run, the arsenal of democracy." Canaris stares at the images. He has been a spy for 30 years. He knows exaggeration, disinformation, pride. This doesn't look like propaganda. It looks like the future. He dismisses the officer and sits alone for a long time. The clock ticks louder. The report sits open on his desk, its words staring back at him. 1 bomber per hour. He thinks of Germany's own factories, Messerschmitt, Junkers, Heinkel, scattered across a nation now dark and hungry, skilled, efficient, proud, but small. Each factory building perhaps 10 bombers a week, if the workers are fed, if the Allies don't bomb the railways, if there's enough aluminum. He reaches for another file. Reports from Speer's ministry, from Goering's Luftwaffe production office. Numbers. Thousands of aircraft promised, hundreds delivered, half grounded for lack of parts. He lays the papers side by side. The arithmetic is obscene. Germany builds 2 heavy bombers a week. America builds 1 every hour. He feels a chill that has nothing to do with the cold. He rises and walks to the map. Across the Atlantic, a small red flag marks the United States. It looks insignificant compared to the vast grey of occupied Europe. But he knows now that color on a map means nothing. Power isn't land. Power is production. The telephone on his desk buzzes. "Admiral," says the voice of Colonel Oster, his deputy. "The Luftwaffe Operations Office requests your presence. They're disputing the American intelligence." Canaris closes his eyes. Of course they are. He takes the folder, tucks it under his arm, and walks out. The corridor smells of tobacco and wet wool. Officers step aside as he passes. In the conference room, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring is already waiting, bloated, resplendent in his uniform, a man whose vanity can outshine disaster. Around the table sit officers from the Air Ministry and Armaments Command. "Ah, Canaris," Göring says with mock warmth. "We were just discussing your latest fairy tale." He taps a folder identical to the one in the Admiral's hand. "This nonsense about Americans building a bomber every hour. You bring us comedy, my friend." Canaris remains standing. "It's no comedy, Reichsmarschall. It's fact." Göring's smile freezes. "Fact? You think I would not know if they were producing at that level? Our spies exaggerate. They must, otherwise they'd be shot." "They've supplied photographs." "Ah, photographs." Göring waves a hand. "Stage plays for journalists." Canaris places the photos on the table. The officers lean in. One whistles softly. The image shows a line of B-24 Liberators stretching into the distance, wingtip to wingtip. Hundreds, maybe thousands. "Impossible," Göring mutters. "Not impossible," Canaris replies. "Industrialized." The room goes quiet. Somewhere outside, anti-aircraft guns rumble in practice fire. Göring's aide, General Milch, clears his throat. "Admiral, perhaps you misinterpret the message. The Americans build kits, sub-assemblies. They claim a bomber per hour for morale." Canaris looks at him evenly. "Even if they lie by half, by a quarter, it's still more than we can match. They are turning war into engineering. We are turning engineering into ruin." Göring slams his hand on the table. "You forget yourself. The Luftwaffe remains the most powerful air force in the world." Canaris meets his eyes. "For now." The words hang there. No one speaks for several seconds. Göring's face reddens, then turns almost purple. "Dismissed," he hisses. Canaris gathers his papers and leaves. In the corridor again, he feels the walls closing in. Not from fear of Göring, but from the knowledge that he is right. That night, he returns home late. His wife greets him with silence. He pours a glass of schnapps and stands at the window overlooking the city. In the distance, he can hear British bombers droning toward the capital. A sound Berlin has learned to live with. He wonders how many of them were built in that factory. How many more will come before Germany builds one to answer? He lifts the glass, but doesn't drink. The schnapps smells faintly of ethanol, industrial alcohol. He thinks of fuel, of wings, of numbers that multiply while men sleep. Across the ocean, somewhere in Michigan, a night shift begins. A whistle blows. Workers in denim and caps step onto the line. The first of 24 bombers for that day takes shape under bright lights. Here, in Berlin, the lights are going out. Canaris sets the glass down. He returns to his desk and opens the file again. At the bottom of the report is a note, added by the agent in Madrid. If this report is true, Germany has already lost the war. It simply hasn't been informed yet. The Admiral folds the page carefully, places it in his safe, and locks it. The key trembles slightly in his hand. Then he turns out the lamp. The room falls into darkness, but the ticking of the clock continues. 1 tick for every hour the Americans build another bomber. And somewhere, deep in the night, a man who has seen the future knows that his country will not survive it. Berlin had always believed in discipline. America believed in chaos. That was the difference the German spies began to understand in 1943, and the difference that would decide the war. The first reports had seemed impossible. Factories the size of villages, assembly lines that never slept, women with no military training building engines, wings, bomb racks with the precision of engineers. Men in overalls, not uniforms, producing more power in a month than an entire Wehrmacht corps could burn in a campaign. The agents sent these stories through Lisbon, Madrid, and Stockholm, and every time the response from Berlin was the same. Exaggeration. Impossible. The Americans are lazy. But the Americans were not lazy. They were busy. The man at the center of it was Henry Ford, an old industrial monarch who despised unions, communists, and sometimes even his own government, but who loved efficiency more than ideology. His company had built cars for 30 years. Now it was building bombers. And not just any bombers. The B-24 Liberator, the most complex aircraft in the world at that time. At Willow Run, Michigan, a city of aluminum and rivets rose from farmland. 2.5 million square feet of factory, its roof shaped like the letter L so that planes could taxi straight out of the building and into the sky. Ford engineers had designed it not as an airfield, but as a machine, a living organism that turned steel and labor into flight. Every 99 minutes, a bomber rolled off the line. The number would drop to 60 as the system reached perfection. A bomber every hour. German intelligence had stumbled upon this secret months before the rest of the world understood it. But no one wanted to believe it. It was too big, too mechanical, too democratic. One Abwehr report described the process in disbelief. Workers on the line do not understand the entire machine they build. Each man performs a single motion, repeating it hundreds of times. Yet the result flies. For German engineers, this was heresy. The Reich believed in craftsmanship, the master technician shaping each component by hand, the proud pilot flying a machine designed for him alone. America had abandoned pride for repetition. That difference between craftsmanship and mass production was the difference between the old world and the new. Inside Willow Run, people moved like parts of a vast clock. Women known as Rosies riveted fuselages with pneumatic hammers. Conveyor belts carried engines like livestock to be mounted under wings. B-24s rolled forward in a procession that never stopped, even when the foremen were asleep. The night shift followed the day without pause. To the Americans, this was progress. To the Germans, it was madness. In Berlin, Industrial Minister Albert Speer received photographs smuggled through neutral Sweden. They showed a forest of cranes and catwalks, workers in rows of hundreds. Lights so bright they erased shadows. He laid the photos before Hitler. "Propaganda," the Führer said without looking closely. "The Americans exaggerate to frighten us." But Speer didn't laugh. He had been to Essen, to Augsburg, to Schweinfurt. He knew what German production looked like. Skilled men, yes, but few of them left. Machines old and slow. Factories half ruined by British bombs. He had seen fuel shortages force workers to bicycle to plants. Meanwhile, in America, the war economy was only accelerating. In 1943 alone, the United States produced 86,000 aircraft, more than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. And that was just the beginning. The Abwehr tried to calculate what this meant. If one factory could build a bomber an hour, how many could the whole nation produce? Their answer came back like a mathematical nightmare. At least 24,000 per year from Willow Run alone. Perhaps 50,000 from the combined Ford, Consolidated, and Douglas plants. Goering refused to believe it. He bragged publicly that Germany would soon produce 4,000 aircraft per month. In truth, it never reached half that number. The Americans measured progress not in factories, but in networks. Their genius was not in design, but in distribution. Parts for each Liberator came from thousands of subcontractors. Engines from Buick, tires from Goodyear, gauges from small shops in Ohio. A bomber assembled in Michigan was a collaboration of an entire continent, and that was what terrified the German spies most. You could bomb a factory. You couldn't bomb a network. In one intercepted memo, an Abwehr officer wrote bitterly, "The Americans have dissolved war into arithmetic. They no longer fight, they compute." Willow Run was more than a plant. It was an idea. The physical manifestation of a nation that had decided war was not an art, but an equation. Every hour, the plant consumed 15 tons of aluminum, 3 tons of steel, and 100,000 rivets. Every hour, it created a machine that could fly 2,000 miles and carry 5 tons of bombs. The Germans could build masterpieces. The Americans built miracles by the dozen. Inside the Abwehr, analysts debated what to do. Some argued to present the truth directly to Hitler. Others warned it would only anger him. "He wants faith, not numbers," one officer said, "and faith cannot burn fuel." Canaris was silent. He had seen enough to know that the truth didn't need belief. It just needed time. In early April 1943, another report arrived from Lisbon. American shipyards had launched 600 Liberty cargo ships since January. 600. Each one capable of carrying 10,000 tons of cargo, built in under a month. Germany had built 6 submarines in that same period. In the war rooms, on the production charts, in the private diaries of engineers and spies, a pattern formed. A world measured not in courage, but in capacity. The Abwehr's analysts began to speak quietly of a new kind of warfare. Krieg der Fabriken, the war of factories. And slowly, even inside the fortress of ideology that was Berlin, some began to understand. Colonel Hans Oster, Canaris's deputy, whispered to him one evening, "They are turning industry into a weapon. We are still turning weapons into industry." Canaris smiled without humor. "Yes," he said. "They build machines to make machines. We build speeches to explain failure." By summer, German spies in America had stopped reporting troop movements or naval deployments. None of it mattered anymore. The reports were about numbers. How many shifts, how many men, how many tons. They were sending warnings about momentum itself. And for once, their information was perfect. Because even as German factories rebuilt after each bombing, America's production doubled. What the Reich called total war was already being outpaced by a democracy that never even declared it. In the fall of 1943, a single statistic began circulating quietly within the Abwehr, one that Canaris never shared with Hitler. By year's end, American aircraft plants would produce 125,000 planes. Germany would produce 25,000. The ratio was 5-1. The next year, it would be 8-1. No strategy could erase that. No speech could slow it. The Americans weren't just outbuilding Germany. They were outlasting it. And somewhere in Michigan, as the night shift blew its whistle and another bomber rolled off the line, the war tilted forever. April 1943. The Reich Chancellery smells of wax, cigars, and power, that heavy scent of a dying empire pretending to live forever. The marble floors still gleam, but the corridors are quieter now. Too many names have vanished from the brass plates. Too many reports arrive sealed and silent. In a waiting room outside the Führer's office, Admiral Canaris sits alone with a folder on his knees. His uniform is immaculate, his face drawn and pale. The papers inside that folder have traveled through Lisbon, Madrid, and Stockholm, through channels of fear and code. They are precise, boring, impossible, and fatal. The door opens. An aide with polished boots says, "The Führer will see you now." Inside, Adolf Hitler stands over a map of Europe, his fingers pressed on a single front line. Kursk. He doesn't look up. "You have something important, Admiral?" Canaris salutes, then lays the folder on the table. "Intelligence from our agents in the United States, my Führer." Hitler waves impatiently. "Not about troop movements again, I hope. The Americans have no soldiers worth mentioning." "Not soldiers," Canaris says quietly. "Factories." Hitler glances up, irritation flickering. "Factories?" "Yes. The Americans have built one that produces 4-engine bombers at a rate of 1 every hour." The room goes still. Goering, seated in the corner, gives a soft chuckle. "You bring jokes to the Führer now, Canaris." Canaris slides a photograph across the table. It shows the interior of Willow Run, a hangar vast enough to contain clouds. Men and women, thousands of them, move in rows under bright lights. In the background, a line of B-24 bombers stretches beyond the camera's reach. Hitler stares at it, then at Canaris. "This is propaganda. It's not, mein Führer. We have multiple confirmations." Ford Motor Company has turned car production into aircraft production. Every hour, a bomber leaves the line. Goering snorts. "Ridiculous! Even we could never achieve such efficiency. The Americans are incapable of such discipline." "Exactly," Canaris says softly. "They replaced discipline with abundance." The words hang in the air like a draft of cold air through stone. Hitler's brow tightens. "Abundance? That is a Jewish trick. They flood the world with materialism to hide their weakness." Canaris hesitates. There is no safe way to speak the truth, but he speaks anyway. "They are flooding the world with machines, mein Führer, and machines do not tire. Machines do not fear. They aren't fear. They are turning war into manufacturing." Goering's laughter is loud and short. "And we have turned manufacturing into war. They may have numbers, but we have faith." Hitler's voice cuts through the room. "Faith built the Reich. Faith will carry it to victory." Canaris lowers his eyes. "Faith cannot fly, mein Führer, not without engines." For a moment, there is nothing but the sound of Hitler's breathing, sharp, shallow. Goering shifts uncomfortably. Then Hitler slams his fist onto the map. "You defeatists make me sick. Always your numbers, your statistics. Have you no spirit, no vision? The German will triumph through will. Will, Canaris says softly, cannot refine fuel. It's the wrong sentence, the fatal one. The room freezes. Goering's face goes red. Hitler's eyes burn with something between rage and fear. Get out, he says. Out! Canaris salutes once, turns, and leaves without a word. The heavy door closes behind him like a verdict. In the hallway he exhales. His hands tremble only slightly. He knows what will follow. Not today, perhaps not this month, but soon. You do not speak arithmetic to a man who believes himself mathematics incarnate. Inside, Goering pours himself a drink and mutters, "That little admiral sees shadows everywhere." Hitler doesn't answer. He is still staring at the photograph. The bright lights, the women in overalls, the words printed on the factory wall. Willow Run, Arsenal of Democracy. He mutters, "Democracy builds nothing. It destroys." But the image won't leave his mind. That night, the photograph lies on his desk while he writes orders for Operation Citadel, the great counteroffensive at Kursk. Tanks, artillery, fuel allocations, deadlines, all dependent on industry that no longer exists. He doesn't see the irony. Canaris, meanwhile, walks back through the dark streets of Berlin. Air raid sirens moan again, a sound that has become almost comforting. British bombers hum somewhere above the clouds, invisible but inevitable. He stops near the river, watching the sky flash faintly as flak bursts bloom. He thinks of the photograph again, those bright lights, those endless wings. He imagines them flying overhead one day, not British but American, dropping not 100 bombs but thousands. The spy who knows too much is always the loneliest man alive. A week later, Goering summons his aides. "Spread word," he says. "The American factory story is enemy propaganda. Anyone repeating it will face court-martial." Milch nods. "Understood, Reichsmarschall." But rumors are harder to kill than armies. Within weeks, officers across Berlin are whispering about the bomber factory. Some laugh. Others whisper about a new kind of war. Engineers shake their heads in disbelief. "One every hour," they murmur. "If it's true, we are finished." The Abwehr intercepts an Allied radio broadcast boasting of American production miracles. The words are meant for morale, but in Berlin they sound like a death sentence. Canaris attends another meeting with Speer in the Ministry of Armaments. The walls hum with generators. The smell of coffee mixes with oil. Speer looks exhausted, grey under his neat hair. "They're not lying," he says. "Our reconnaissance confirms multiple plants, all mechanized. They are building aircraft like we build cars. No, faster." He looks at Canaris. "The Führer won't believe it." Canaris nods. "He cannot." Speer exhales through his teeth. "Then we are condemned not by the enemy, but by arithmetic." Arithmetic, Canaris says, was always the enemy. They sit in silence. Outside, the wind carries the sound of distant explosions, another raid, another factory burning. Speer finally says, "You realize, Admiral, that we are the last men in Germany who still believe in facts." Canaris smiles faintly. "That is why we will not survive." He leaves the ministry and walks out into the air. The city glows faintly red from the fires on the horizon. He imagines that somewhere in America, the same red glow comes from furnaces, from foundries that never stop. In May, another report arrives. Production increase confirmed. 1 bomber every 63 minutes. Ford plans to reduce the interval to 58. The Abwehr clerk who types the report pauses halfway through and writes in the margin, "Why are we still fighting?" By summer, the first formations of B-24 Liberators built at Willow Run are appearing in British skies. They fly in herds, hundreds together, polished aluminum flashing in the sun. From the ground, they look like a new kind of weather. Berlin hears them before it sees them. The sound fills the sky like an approaching tide. People look up and realize the thunder is not from the earth, but from industry itself. The Reich's anti-aircraft crews fire until the barrels glow, but the bombers keep coming. For every one that falls, another replaces it within the week. Somewhere in the smoke, Canaris stands on a balcony watching the formation pass. His face is expressionless. Beside him, a young officer whispers, "How many do you think, sir?" Canaris doesn't look away from the sky. 24. The officer frowns. "Only 24? "No," Canaris says softly. 24 an hour. He turns and walks inside, closing the window behind him as the sound of the new world drowns out the old. Spring, 1944. 24. Germany wakes every morning to the same sound, the low, steady rumble of engines beyond the clouds. It's no longer thunder. Thunder is random, merciful. This is continuous, mechanical, predictable. It begins before dawn and ends after nightfall. The sky itself has turned industrial. Berliners give it names: the rolling storm, the American weather, the machine above God. Mothers hush their children and say, "Don't look up." Soldiers stop pretending to count the formations. There are too many. The prophecies of 1943 have come true. The bombers that Willow Run built by the hour are here now, stretching from horizon to horizon. Flying factories powered by the industrial bloodstream of a continent. At first, the Reich tries to pretend control. Radio broadcasts call them raids, as if they are isolated events, but everyone can see the truth. The air war has become permanent. In March, more than 3,000 Allied aircraft bombed Berlin in a single day. By June, it's 5,000. By September, 8,000. And for every aircraft that goes down, 2 take its place the following week. Germany cannot respond in kind. Its fighter squadrons are skeletons. The Luftwaffe has lost the air, and with it, its soul. Pilots write letters home saying they are flying into mathematics. A Bf-109 ace named Otto Klein describes it in a diary found after his death. "We fight clouds, not men. For every one we burn, 10 appear. The sky repairs itself." In the Ministry of Armaments, Albert Speer studies reports with the precision of a man dissecting his own body. He writes to Hitler, "Each ton of bombs dropped on our factories destroys 3 months of production. Each month we lose 12 factories. The Americans replace that in 1 week." Hitler no longer reads Speer's letters. He prefers fantasies, new jets, miracle weapons, revenge. He orders the construction of the Me-262 jet fighter, convinced it will change the war. But the jet needs fuel. The fuel needs refineries. And the refineries are burning. By late 1944, the German fuel map is a field of craters. The synthetic plants at Leuna, Politz, and Blechhammer lie in ruins. Smoke from the last hydrogenation towers blots the sun. The air smells of burned tar and aluminum. The Luftwaffe begins to ration flight hours. Training schools cut pilots from 150 hours to 30. Some trainees fly once before being sent to combat. They die in their first week, victims not of inexperience, but of physics. Even the legends are falling. Galland, Hartmann, and Barkhorn can no longer find the sky. The aces who once ruled the air now hide in bunkers while American bombers pass overhead in layers. 5,000 meters, 7,000, 9. From the ground, it looks like someone has paved the heavens with silver. The bombers come not only from England, but from Italy, from the Soviet frontier, from Africa. The world itself has turned against Germany in a storm of engines. In the ruins of Berlin, Canaris walks through his office one last time. The walls shake as a formation passes overhead. Papers flutter like dying birds. He doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. The sound is familiar now. His own prophecy echoing across the sky. An aide runs in, shouting, "Admiral, the Americans are bombing again." Canaris stops him with a raised hand. "They're not bombing," he says. "They're building." The aide doesn't understand, but Canaris isn't talking to him. He's talking to the past. Across the Atlantic, the Willow Run plant still hums, 24 hours a day. Day shifts, night shifts, machines feeding machines. The women who once built cars now build wings. Each bomber that rolls out is another nail in the coffin of ideology. Ford engineers have reduced the assembly time to 55 minutes. The plant produces 650 bombers a month. And it's not alone. Boeing in Seattle, Douglas in Tulsa, Consolidated in San Diego. Each one another artery in America's industrial body. By mid-1944, the United States produces more aircraft every 2 months than Germany has built since 1939. The scale defies imagination, but imagination is no longer required. The proof fills the sky. Germany answers with rhetoric. Goebbels speaks of total war, of sacrifice, of endurance. His voice grows shriller as the microphones shake from nearby explosions. He promises new weapons, but the people know that no weapon can fight a world that manufactures destiny by the ton. In June, the Allies land in Normandy. The Luftwaffe barely appears. The sky belongs entirely to the factories. The invasion is a logistics operation protected by weather made of metal. German generals beg for reinforcements, but there are no reserves. Every tank that moves burns its future. Every plane that flies shortens the war by minutes. The Luftwaffe launches desperate sorties with teenage pilots. They die before seeing their targets. One squadron, ordered to intercept an American formation, runs out of fuel before reaching altitude. They land, refuel from their own trucks, and try again. The bombers never notice them. By September, Germany's cities are outlines of stone. Hamburg, Cologne, Darmstadt, Dresden. Each one erased, rebuilt in fire, erased again. The survivors no longer fear the sirens. They fear the silence between them. At night, Berliners walk among the ruins, and above them, the contrails glow faintly in the moonlight. A silver web across a dead empire. Somewhere in Bavaria, Albert Speer writes in his journal, "The Americans have industrialized time. We can no longer measure war in years or victories, but in production cycles. Every hour we lose, they gain an army. The Abwehr is gone now, dissolved under suspicion of treason. Canaris has been dismissed, his files seized. But his words linger among the officers who once served him. They build faster than we can think." By winter, the United States is producing 8,000 aircraft per month. Germany produces 1,200 and loses 1,500. The numbers are no longer strategy, they are physics. One night in December, a British journalist visiting Allied headquarters writes in his notebook, "The sky above Europe belongs to Detroit." He isn't exaggerating. The bombers, the fighters, the transports all come from the same endless supply chain, the same forges that built America's peace and war alike. Even Stalin, far to the east, admits it. The war is won by American machines. The Reich still exists on paper. Its borders still have lines. But its arteries are empty.
When the final spring of 1945 comes, Germany has one secret left. Not a weapon, not a plan, but a truth. It lost the war not in the field, but in the factory. The moment the first bomber left the Willow Run assembly line, the outcome was sealed. The rest was only confirmation. And above the ruins of Berlin, the sky hums with engines that never tire. The mechanical choir of a nation that learned how to turn freedom into production. Canaris listens to it from his cell in Flossenburg prison. He closes his eyes and imagines the sound not as a threat, but as music. A requiem written in horsepower. They were right, he whispers to no one. The hour decided the century. Outside, the American bombers pass overhead, invisible in the clouds, steady as clocks marking the last minutes of the Reich. April 9, 1945. Flossenburg concentration camp. The snow has melted, but the ground is still frozen. Mud, gravel, and bone mixed together under a grey Bavarian sky. The war is ending, but death is not finished with its work. Inside a small brick building, a group of men wait in silence. They are not soldiers anymore. They are evidence. Their names once meant something. Oster, Bonhoeffer, Gera, Zach, and the Admiral, Wilhelm Canaris. He sits apart, wrapped in a thin coat, head bowed, lips moving silently. The guards do not hear his words, but one later remembers that he looked as if he were talking to someone far away. Perhaps he was. A file lies on the camp commandant's desk, stamped Verräter, traitor. Inside, Canaris's reports, letters, intercepted messages, fragments of truth too heavy for the Reich to carry. Somewhere near the bottom, a photograph of the Willow Run plant, black and white and endless. The officer in charge glances at it before closing the folder. So this was the man who told them they couldn't win, he mutters. He should have been believed. At dawn, they lead Canaris into the yard. The air smells of damp rope and diesel. He walks slowly, not out of fear, but because he has seen everything. The first victories, the first illusions, and now the final arithmetic. He asks the guard for a moment. The guard nods. Canaris turns his face to the east, where the sky is paling. Somewhere beyond those clouds, bombers still hum, their engines tracing invisible circles of domination. The world he warned about has arrived. He whispers one last sentence. A prayer or a confession. Truth is not what men believe. It is what endures. The rope tightens. The truth endures. 2 weeks later, American troops enter Flossenburg. They find the gallows still standing, the rope still damp. A soldier in the 90th Infantry reads the names on the execution list, unfamiliar and foreign. When he reaches Canaris, he frowns. Wasn't that their spy chief? Yes, says his sergeant. Guess even their spies stopped believing. The soldier nods, then looks up at the grey sky. A flight of B-17s drones overhead, heading east toward targets that no longer exist. Guess he was right, the soldier says quietly. In Berlin,
The Reich has collapsed into ash and memory. The same offices that once laughed at the bomber-per-hour report are now piles of brick. The marble corridors echo only with footsteps of occupation troops. Albert Speer, arrested days later, writes from his cell, "Canaris understood before all of us that we were living in a world no longer ruled by faith or command, but by output. He died for truth, not treason." Across the Atlantic, Willow Run keeps working, building C-47 transports for food drops over a starving Europe. The same line that once produced bombers now delivers bread. The workers call it Operation Reversal. A photograph from 1946 shows the factory floor. Wide, clean, silent except for the hum of machines retooled for peace. A banner still hangs from the ceiling, faded but legible. We can do it. Years pass. The bombers are gone. The ruins are rebuilt. The noise of war becomes the noise of traffic, typewriters, commerce. In a museum in Berlin, behind a glass case, lies the original Abwehr report dated March 17, 1943. The one that began everything. The carbon copy is faded, the words barely visible. One American factory now producing one 4-engine bomber per hour. Visitors walk past without stopping. Only the curator, an old man with shaking hands, lingers there in the evenings. Sometimes he whispers, "They didn't lose in battle. They lost in arithmetic." In 1965, a small ceremony takes place in Flensburg near the sea. A bronze plaque is unveiled on a wall of the former naval school where Canaris once trained recruits. The inscription reads, "Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, who saw too clearly and spoke too soon." A retired American colonel attending the ceremony remarks to a journalist, "He was one of the few who realized wars are no longer fought by armies, but by assembly lines." The journalist asks him what he means. The colonel gestures toward the horizon, where tankers cross the Atlantic. Back then, he saw it in bombers. Today, it's everything. Oil, food, machines, data. Whoever builds faster rules the world. Even now, the lesson survives. Every generation repeats it. Those who mistake courage for capacity, who worship pride over production, who believe that spirit alone can replace supply. The uniforms change, the slogans change, but the formula remains. A single factory in peace can be worth an army in war. The world that killed Canaris lives by his warning. The nations that ignored it have vanished. Somewhere in Michigan, the ruins of Willow Run still stand, vast, silent, reclaimed by grass and dust. Tourists walk through the hangar with cameras, unaware that this is where the century was decided. The wind moves through broken windows, carrying faint echoes. The clatter of rivet guns, the whistle of a shift change, the heartbeat of an empire built not on land, but on rhythm. A plaque near the entrance bears a single line, simple and true. Here, freedom learned to fly by the hour. And if you stand there long enough, you can almost hear it. The pulse of engines that never slept. The hum of democracy made mechanical. The sound of the sky turning American. The sound that terrified Berlin. The sound that ended the war.